Hello and welcome to week 12 in behavior management, and we are in chapter 12. This class, the chapters have been lining up right with each week, looking at functional analysis. And this is really kind of where, as they might say, the rubber meets the road when we are trying to solve behavior problems using behavior management techniques. Now, we have to go back a little bit to the fundamental, theoretical, foundational theories associated with behavior management. First, the law of effect, meaning if a positive outcome precedes a behavior, the behavior is going to be strengthened. If a negative outcome comes after the behavior, it's going to be weakened or eliminated. The implication of that from a descriptive point of view is that all behavior occurs within a context that either reinforces or punishes that behavior. So if a behavior is existing, if something is happening and it's maintaining over time without any intervention, then something out there is reinforcing it. Now, that something out there might be internal reinforcement, it might be external reinforcement, but when we're using these tools, we have to come at it from the point of view of there is a reason, there is a purpose, there is a function, hence the word functional analysis, for every behavior that we're observing. Now, not all behaviors need to be analyzed this way. However, and in addition, I could say, we may, as I'll get to in a little bit, we may never know why a person behaved in a certain way. We can still use functional analysis as a way to find out why somebody is doing something. So we start off, essentially there are two reasons why behavior occurs. Behaviors occur for people to get something, or behaviors occur for them to get away from something. So we might see behaviors, typically, attention, people acting to get revenge, people acting to express themselves, to express power, to express emotion such as anger and fear, and even just to stimulate themselves because they're bored. And conversely, we might see people act out in certain ways because they're trying to get away from something. We see bored again, trying to get out of a boring situation, acting to avoid potential punishment they understand is out there. They might be uncomfortable, they might be embarrassed, all kinds of reasons. And really, as this part right here has to do with our chapter 12 discussion. Our chapter 12 discussion, I want you to brainstorm, I want you to pick a problem behavior. Could be your own behavior, could be somebody else's behavior, your kid's behavior, your spouse's behavior, and come up with all the different reasons why that behavior could be happening. What are they trying to avoid? What are they trying to get? And those can happen at the same time, like the boredom one. I may want to stimulate myself by acting out in class because I'm bored. So I'm gaining the attention of other people, making them laugh, but I'm also getting away from boredom. Maybe I'm going to act out in a way that infuriates the teacher, showing power on my part. That individual kicks me out of class. Win-win, right? I didn't want to be there. I was bored anyway. And you can see how complex the motivations for behavior can become. So we're looking at behaviors where we get away from something or we get something that we want. So there's always a function for behaviors that we observe. When we are analyzing a situation, we have to consider, why is the behavior maintaining itself? Now, just as a little bit of a side before I go into much more concrete examples, Many of you are proposing adding behaviors to your life, where you're going to be drinking more water or exercising or, paying more attention to your garden or something like that. And what you have to do when you're looking at that is you have to look at, what would I be doing instead of those things that I would like to be doing? Instead of drinking water, what am I drinking? Instead of working in the garden, what am I doing? Instead of exercising, what am I doing? And from a functional analysis point, you have to look at that behavior as well and say, well, what is it about that? We're always doing something. So I'm either, let's say I'm staring at the wall instead of exercising. Why am I staring at the wall? A, to avoid the pain of exercise. Probably a good reason to stare at the wall. Probably I'm imagining things or letting my mind wander or something like that, that can be what I'm trying to get. And we have to look at those reasons. And the reason we have to look at those reasons is that we want to develop hypotheses about why the behavior is happening so that we can replace it with a more functional behavior that also meets the same outcomes. I'll do a simple one. Let's say I'm the class clown, and I grew up that way. I was the class clown in my class. I was fooling around all the time, and I got it for attention, for status, for power, for all of those things, distraction. I was bored, all of those things. So my teacher could sit down with me and say, okay, let's validate that Mark is bored. Mark likes attention. Mark likes to make people laugh, all of these things. Let's say that we're going to call those needs valid because I'm doing them in the classroom. That's how badly I want that. And then the teacher could come up with a way for me to meet all those needs without disrupting the class. And I'm going to give you the exact example. It's a great, great thing that happened. I was in the 9th grade and I was taking science. I was very into science, and I had this thing about science teachers and just trying to impress them, and all, and my fooling around and my knowledge base and all that stuff, motivated by complex, feelings of insecurity. I'm going to psychoanalyze the feeling of insecurity, wanting to demonstrate knowledge about what we're talking about, wanting to be the center of attention, hence becoming a teacher, and all of that. And the teacher recognized that it's quite possible they could turn those needs into a very functional behavior. Starting with some experiences that I had prior to that when I was living in Guam, and we were doing, and I did scuba diving, and I really got into aquatic culture and whatnot, particularly coral and fish, and very into aquatic animals and stuff like that. And so the teacher said, I want you to do presentations in class on the material that you know well. Now, here was this opportunity the teacher gave to me to go up in front of the class and do all those things that I've been fooling around to get. I got attention. I was able to tell jokes. I was able to demonstrate my knowledge. I was able to get the respect from the teacher, all of that stuff. And she turned it into a functional aspect of the class. This, of course, depended on, I had to behave in class, and they would give me this opportunity. So I ended up creating this, presentation on coral, what the coral polyps, how they develop, how they take minerals from the seawater and create what we know of as coral reefs and all the different types of coral. And I had examples that I had, got from the ocean, stuff like this. I was in my glory. I also need you to recognize that the teacher was also very effectively managing my classroom behavior by giving me a better way to meet the needs that I had, to be the center of attention, to be funny, to be recognized for my knowledge, to be praised by the teachers and stuff like that. So much. This was a pinnacle moment in my life, and that pretty much solidified my trajectory. I found out I was good at it. Found out I was good at making presentations of the stuff that I knew. I artistic and stuff like this. So in ninth grade, I had my first teaching a class experience, and I got the bug, not only because it effectively managed my behavior in that class, it went beyond that. It really, in ninth grade, she had me go to the other science classes. This is for the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and do the same presentation. Wow. And then they had a bunch of teachers come in and they did the presentation to them. And that this I was in my glory. And a problem student became a model student because she didn't invalidate the needs that I had for why I was acting out in class. She recognized them and found me a better way to do it. So, not that everything you do will result in the production of a professor like this, but that was my story, and um, very pinnacle, a very big turning point in my life in terms of what I eventually wanted to do. Now, sometimes, because of the way someone has been raised or the opportunities they've had to learn, or because of disabilities or and the consequences of disabilities. Sometimes having disabilities keeps you from engaging in the social interactions that teach you a variety of ways to cope with emotional, physical, and social situations. If you are, the reality is if someone is using a wheelchair for mobility, and because of that, in their particular situation, they're not able to engage in many of the traditional games and whatnot at recess. Without intervention, they do not necessarily acquire the skill set that they would have acquired had they been able to engage in those activities. Some of them hard learning, somebody getting beaten in a race, or failing to do something, not getting picked for the team, and stuff like that. All of these things, issues of failure and interactions with others and people who are better than you, and how you react to people that are worse than you in whatever game that you're playing, kind of thing. It's why it's important when people have disabilities for the adults around them to try and find ways in which those individuals can participate in those kinds of social learning activities, where the skill set on how do I deal with anger, frustration, happiness, joy, winning, losing, how do I deal with all of those things emotionally? How many different ways can I deal with that? We call that the repertoire of responses. So if a person's angry and they have a very limited repertoire of responses to anger. You may know people like this. You may know people who, when they're angry, they just pop off, and they're throwing something, or they're yelling and screaming and stuff like that, and they don't seem to have the capacity to maybe try something else. Take a walk, breathe, play some music in their headphones. They just go to that one go-to place, and that can be problematic too. So functional assessment or functional analysis, as we're talking about, is really the journey that we take to try and understand really why somebody is doing something. And we want to be able to avoid those catch-all things, a person's acting out because they're trying to get attention. Maybe they might be trying to get attention. At the same time, they might be trying to get other things or trying to communicate something. And as I have told teachers when I have been involved in students' interactions in schools themselves. I've often told teachers, well, if somebody has to act out that much to get your attention, maybe there might be something that you can do about giving that person attention that precludes them having to act out so much. They don't always like to hear that, but the reality is the teachers, the adults in the room, supposed to be in charge of the time, their attention, their energies, and whatnot. And when somebody is acting out, they're often communicating, I'm bored, I'm overwhelmed, I want to do something else, I'm stuck, I'm hurting, maybe I had a really bad event happen at home, or I have stuff going on at home and I'm dealing with it here. All of those things. It's not always just for attention. Okay, so in behavior analysis, we are somewhat scientists. Can't read people's minds. We can ask them, why are you doing this? Did you ever ask a teenager, why'd you do that? And they go, I don't know. I guess that was a pretty good impression. Probably because I said that so many times when I was a teenager. I don't know. And sometimes they don't. You're not aware, that they have a limited repertoire of responses. You have to teach them how to come up with better ways to get what they wanted, like the teacher did to me. Saw me as an individual who could probably pull off presenting this stuff to class, the stuff that I did know, those experiences that I had that were unique, and then capitalized on that to manage my behavior in the classroom extremely well. So let's take a look at how we might figure this out using our ABC contingency plans here. Here's our first set of plans here. We look at, this is the existing situation, the existing ABC. We have a situation, a context, we'll just call it that for now. We have an undesirable behavior, and we recognize that that behavior has a function and has reinforcing now consequences. Even if those consequences appear negative to us, like when we are in a negative feedback loop, and somebody is acting out and I send them out of class, we're assuming that that's punishment, that I'm giving you a timeout from the wonderful learning experience that you're having in the classroom, when in fact, they don't like learning experiences and they would rather be sitting in the hallway. So you essentially have rewarded their behavior by giving them what they want. Understand, another little aside that I like to tell teachers, all of us who are teachers, we love to learn. That's why we got into this. We like to read about things. We like to learn about things. We like to be tested on our knowledge. We like to be able to demonstrate what we know, and we feel a very great satisfaction about just acquiring knowledge. We are foreigners. We are aliens to most of our students who are not like that. They're there because they have to be, because they're being forced to do this. They don't like it, and we're maybe part of what we're doing is trying to build that love for learning, but might not be there, might not ever be there. And so we're really talking about two different worlds. As a learning, loving student, to some degree, being taken out of the classroom was very, very painful for me. I was being restricted from that thing that I liked to do. That's me. So when we give somebody a timeout like that, or they're in a fight with their siblings, so we give them a timeout, we might want to analyze that and give that person a better way to get out of this complex social environment without hitting their brother. So let's use that as an example, just because I made it up. So here we have our when the kids are playing in the playroom, the undesirable behaviors, after a while, Billy's going to start hitting on his little brothers. We analyze that. We think, well, why is he doing that? And we find out, whenever he's doing that, I'm sending him to his room. And now we're going to start experimenting. Well, what if little Billy doesn't like playing with his little brothers? So I'm going to intervene and I'm going to say, Okay, now maybe the games that they're playing are boring to the older sibling, and they're just bored, and so they're just going to start acting out so they can get out of the situation and say, okay, let's cut a deal. Let's cut a deal. I said, if you play, maybe I'll go in and describe a behavior. Say, if you play one game with them, I'll let you leave. You just have to play one game with them. It may be that the older sibling has not learned to appreciate that time with their younger siblings, but you won't get there automatically. You want them to eventually be able to play well together, straight into adulthood, one of these days. So, but we're going to validate that maybe the older sibling is bored with the types of games. So we say, well, what kind of games do you like to play? And maybe they say, oh, I like to play chess. I hope nobody ever asks me for that, but they might say, I want to play chess. So you cut a deal. You say, all right, if you, in this time, if you play one game with your younger siblings, totally into that game, I will give you the timeout. That's not a punishment anymore. That's a reward. I'm going to give you the timeout, and then tonight you and I will get a half hour together playing chess. About as much as I could tolerate playing chess myself. What we have created is an alternative ABC. So let's go back to our little chart here. You can see I have some room on the bottom for another form here. We have the ABC. We have the same situation, but now we replaced the undesirable with a desirable behavior. And the behavior now serves the same function. The behavior includes an escape and the additional reward of something that they like to do. That's just an example. There's a trillion ways you can probably deal with that particular situation. But what I did is I actually took what I thought was a punishment, sending him to his room because he's hitting his little brothers. When in fact, that's the reward now. If you play one game, then you can go to your room. You've done the big brother duty. That's awesome, and I'm going to reward that with some special time playing a game that you like to do. Or if I'm not into chess, then you can get a chess book, or you can get, you can watch, famous chess players on TV, and for that half hour, I'm just gonna, try to give you what you want. What I'm eventually going to get is a period of time in which the older sibling is playing with their younger siblings. That's what I want to see. That's the desirable. And by mixing that up with some time away and some, the behavior, I actually include time away as part of the behavior, and the consequences, they get extra chess time of some kind. So we have this two sets here. We're looking at the undesirable behavior, and by analyzing what we think might be really going on as to why the older sibling is hitting on their younger siblings, we might be able to find a good replacement behavior for that person and reward that. Now you look on that graph, I said additional consequences. We have to add the additional consequences because the original behavior is already being reinforced. It's already established. So we need to sweeten the deal for someone to choose a new behavior. So sometimes when we're looking at this, we kind of look at it as a crossroads. You can graphically present this as a crossroads. You have an individual in a particular situation. Up until now, their repertoire of behaviors, when they're angry, they start throwing things around. So we say, okay, here's the deal. You start throwing things around, and you're going to get X punishment or whatever. However, I understand you're angry. So let's find a better way for you to get that energy out. Something didn't go as well. So let's create a behavior prime. So you have normal behavior, which is the one that's being problematic. And then you have the new behavior. Now, this new behavior is going to be, you come to the teacher, you say that you're angry, you process that a little bit, and then you get to go choose another aspect, another way to get that energy out. Maybe you go to the gym and you get to shoot foul shots for a little bit. So that becomes the new. Now, because the other one up until now has been effectively functional, we have to make our plan more attractive than the old habit. So we make that more attractive. Not only do I want you to not throw things around, I also want you to come and talk to me, and we can talk about anger and do that kind of emotional education process. And then I'm going to reward you on top of that. Not only are you going to get the needs met, that you're able to deal with your anger and get that frustration, you're going to get more. If you choose this path instead of this path, I will give you even more. Maybe you'll get more tokens. Maybe you'll get more. Maybe that gym time, maybe the actual behavior is going to be rewarding. Maybe there's an accumulation of something. And keep on choosing the right path, you get this accumulation of rewards on there until, this is the whole thing, right? Until the individual recognizes that this other path is actually, it actually has other consequences. You know, when you start throwing things around and you hit somebody, you feel bad, you have guilt, your friends don't want to play with you anymore, nobody wants you on their team, you know, and all that stuff. There's all these consequences that happen from acting out negatively. And then once they've been, you know, let's push it over to this new behavior, train this new behavior by making it more attractive. And then eventually the natural consequences of functional, socially desirable behaviors begin to take hold, and the individual starts to like doing that, and their personality has changed. You've given them one more behavior to pick from when they're feeling angry. Brain plasticity, people, that's what it is. We have a network of automatic response that's in our brain. You can look at this neurologically, and by practicing another pathway and using the reward system, you know, put something right in the limbic system right there, by giving them a reward on this other one, eventually this path doesn't look so tempting anymore. This one's a lot better, and the individual's habits of behavior can become, they're normal, can become more socially appropriate and all that stuff. The idea of functional analysis is the scientific inquiry and exploration for the true functions of the behavior, so that we can find replacement behaviors that are more socially desirable and meet the same needs. So, there's a quiz. The quiz, 3 questions. Describe how you might conduct a functional assessment. I do those steps in the course book. Use a concrete world example to explain it. Maybe pick a behavior. Pick the behavior maybe you were doing that you're trying to get rid of and replace with another behavior. Like, I watch TV instead of exercising. What can I do? You know, kind of, and do the functional analysis. Describe in your own words how behavior can be a form of communication, a way in which people communicate ideas from one to another. And then describe the 2 main major functions of behavior described in this unit. That's the get and get away from. Describe those again in all your own words. So that's it for this week. This is powerful content, because it really drives to the core of the theory and understanding in terms of behavior as it manifests within the realm of motivation, the larger field of what drives us to act in certain ways. And so we're dipping our feet into another very large pool of knowledge that has to do with human motivation. And here we're looking at it from I'll use the word again from a functional perspective, is how can we use an analysis of somebody's functional reasons for behavior to help them come up with more socially desirable ways to get their needs met. There you go. All right, so that's it for this week. I'll see you online in the brainstorming discussion, and have a great week. Enjoy the weather, and I will see you next time.